Thank you. Okay, we're all here. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. The West Hollywood City Council acknowledges that the land on which we gather and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tongva and Gabrielino Kizh people. I would like to call our regularly scheduled West Hollywood Planning Commission meeting to order. It's Thursday, May 16th, 2024, and it is 6:34. First item, Pledge of Allegiance. Roger Rath, do you mind leading us in the pledge? Thank you. Thank you. David, roll call.
Good evening. Tonight, Commissioner Jones is excused, so all voting records will reflect her absence. Commissioner Meadows.
Present.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Present.
Commissioner Gregoire.
Here.
Commissioner Edwards.
Here.
Vice Chair Lombardi.
Present.
Chair Carvalero.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 4, approval of the agenda. I'd like to propose a change to the agenda. Given I intend to recuse myself from item 10C, Vice Chair Lombardi will manage the second half of the meeting. I would like to propose that we move items 11, 12, 13, 14, and 16 to take place immediately after item 8, consent calendar. Are all in agreement?
I'll second.
Do I have a motion?
Oh, I'll move.
Okay.
And you're putting the,
Great. Thank you.
you're also moving the order of the two hearing items, right? As
Sorry?
part of that motion? You're moving 10B and C up above 10A? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
So 10 B and C before 10A, and then 11 through 16.
Minus public comments happen immediately after item 8.
Got it. Thank you.
We have a motion by Commissioner Meadows. Do we have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Gregoire. And the motion passes. The agenda is approved as amended for May 16th, 2024.
Great, thank you. Item 5, approval of the meeting minutes for March 2nd, 2024. Do we have any corrections that we need to make note of? No?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Hoopengarner. Second. Seconded by Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you.
And the motion passes for approving the minutes for May 2nd, 2024 as presented, noting Commissioner Jones excused.
Thank you. Item 6, public comments. Do we have any public comments at this time?
We have no public general comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. Item 7, the director's report.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Planning Commissioners. Nick Marisich, Community Development Director. For my director's report this evening, I have a few updates to share with you and the community. I wanted to start by flagging a couple of items from the most recent City Council meeting on May 6th. First, it was item 2L on the agenda. The Community Development Department transmitted its second quarterly report on the status of major development projects, and this was presented as an informational item. The report covers 15 projects, 7 of which have already received planning entitlements, and the other 8 are still working their way through the planning process. These are commercial or mixed-use projects that consist of 30,000 square feet or greater of new development, and which require the review and approval of a development permit by the Planning Commission. This report can be accessed under past council meeting agendas at weho.org, and again, it was item 2L on the May 6th agenda. So we'll continue to provide these quarterly reports as requested by the City Council. The other item I wanted to highlight from the recent council meeting was item 5A. The Long Range Planning Division presented the results of a feasibility study that was analyzing housing unit replacement requirements in new housing projects when rent stabilized units are demolished for new development. There are certain replacement requirements in the code, and the economic feasibility of those requirements was analyzed in a study and the results presented. And as a result of that, the City Council gave direction to staff to prepare a zone text amendment based on the findings of the study, and staff will be working to bring this amendment forward to for consideration by the Commission. I wanted to highlight that the city has posted to the Engage WeHo online platform a discussion draft of a set of amendments to the Sunset Arts and Advertising Policy, which is a part of the Sunset Specific Plan. This draft ordinance was discussed earlier this evening at the Long Range Planning Subcommittee of the Planning Commission, and we plan on bringing it back to the subcommittee again for further discussion at their next meeting on June 20th, and that's at 5:30 p.m. And then finally, just a reminder about the informational open house coming up this coming Tuesday, May 21st at 6 p.m. at Plummer Park. And this is regarding the Willoughby, Vista Gardner, and King Street concept plan. This is an opportunity for community members to learn more about the street design concept plan, which was recently approved by the City Council in March of this year. It will be an in-person meeting where there'll be an opportunity to get an overview of the project as well as detailed information about the components of the plan. And the next stage of the project will determine the feasibility of certain components from the plan and as well as incorporate any necessary refinements for the final design. So this concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry if I talked fast.
No, it's good. Do we have any questions for the director? No? Thank you. Item 8, consent calendar, we have none. We'll skip to item 11, new business, we have none. 12, unfinished business, we have none. 13, excluded consent calendar, we have none. Item 14, items from the staff, the planning manager's update, and the subcommittee management.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Thank you. I'll go through our upcoming agendas. So for Planning Commission, our next meeting, correct me, is the next meeting on June 20th? David Gillig?
June 6th.
June 6th. I wasn't sure if we had canceled that one. Sometimes the first meeting in June gets canceled. I apologize. All right, so on the June 6th agenda, we have 7707 Santa Monica Boulevard, a request for off-site alcohol sale at an existing convenience store or small market. We have a zone text amendment for the expansion of hotel rooftop amenities, and we will have our annual capital improvements plan, general plan consistency item. And then for the following meeting, some of that is still being worked out on June 20th, but we should have an update for a previously approved conditional use permit for Barry's Boot Camp right at Santa Monica Boulevard, 8383 Santa Monica Boulevard, and looks like that we will have our elections for chair and vice chair on that evening as well. For subcommittees, we do not have any items coming up for design review subcommittee. For the long range planning project subcommittee, at the next meeting, we will again hear the second part of the Sunset Arts and Advertising Policy Amendments item. And on the next meeting of the Sunset Arts and Advertising Subcommittee, it will be June 13th, and we will be reviewing 8801 Sunset Boulevard. So if you have any questions on any of those items, I'm here. Great, that's all I had, thank you.
No? Yes? Commissioner Hoopengartner?
Hi. I'd like to bring up something that happened at 2 meetings ago about development agreements, and I'd like to ask at a future meeting for legal to kind of give us input on the role of the Planning Commission when it comes to development agreements, because there was some confusion because we have, and for example, we have one this evening, a development agreement that says that we, the Planning Commission, make the findings that this is in the best interest of the city, et cetera, and we are recommending it to City Council. But then there was some issues about the actual benefits analysis being made available to the Planning Commission and to the public in order to do that analysis. So my question is, are we or are we not being asked to make a recommendation to City Council Because in my experience, I've often heard city council say, well, planning, approved this, so it must be good. But if planning is not reviewing the development agreement, then that needs to be communicated to the city council. So I would like some advice for myself, and I don't know about my colleagues, about exactly what is the Planning Commission's role in development agreements, given the language that is in the documents that we're being asked to make the findings on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes? No? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, item 9, public hearing, section 1, projects subject to the Housing Accountability Act. We have none. Item 10, public hearing, section 2, projects that require a public hearing under the law. We will move forward with item 10B, commission. The commission has been asked to hold a public hearing regarding a proposed request for conditional use permit for off-site alcoholic beverage sales at a general retail store located at 8733 Santa Monica Boulevard. And I understand we have a staff report from Roger Rath. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Roger Rath, and I'm an Associate Planner with the Current and Historic Preservation Planning Team. Today's presentation should only take about 3 to 4 minutes to present. As mentioned, this project is a request for a conditional use permit for off-site sales of beer and wine at a general retail store located at 8733 Santa Monica Boulevard. So the property is located on the northeast corner of Santa Monica Boulevard and Hancock Avenue. The property is located in a CC1, which is Commercial Community 1 zone, in the Santa Monica Boulevard West District as defined by the general plan. Surrounding properties include commercial zones to the east, west, and south with restaurants, personal service uses, and mixed uses, and residential uses to the north. The property contains a 2-story U-shaped multi-tenant building with a tenant space located within the courtyard type shape configuration. The store, WeHo Cigar and Smoke Shop, has been in continuous use since December 2023. According to the West Hollywood Municipal Code, the sale of alcohol for off-site consumption requires a conditional use permit with review and approval by the Planning Commission. The applicant has requested to sell beer and wine for off-site consumption by providing 2 fridges as identified on the site and on this floor plan in yellow. The total square footage requested by the applicant is 15 square feet of the total square footage of the display of beer and wine for patrons to purchase. The rest of the interior of the store includes a sales area for various merchandise, an office, a bathroom, and a storage area. The applicant proposes the sale of beer and wine for off-site consumption within the existing operating hours of the retail store, which is from Sunday to Thursday, from 10 a.m. to 12 a.m., and Friday and Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. The use is contained within the interior of the business and is limited to 15 square feet. Additionally, the location of the retail store is largely buffered by the courtyard shape of the building it is located, further preventing sound disturbance from the store to residential neighbors to the north. There is no changes to the exterior of the building and only an operational change is proposed. The use is a condition to meet all requirements in section 19.36.060, which puts standards on all off-site alcoholic beverage sales, which includes physical conditions of the property and operations. These standards can be found in the resolution as conditions 3.1 to 3.6. As conditioned, the proposed sale of beer and wine for off-site consumption will be an amenity for residents and patrons of the business and will not cause new or exacerbate any existing public nuisance in the vicinity. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the application with the adoption of draft resolution number PC 24-1557. Additionally, there was a clerical error I would like to have corrected for the record. So section 5, letter D, of the resolution, which can be found on page 3. There are references to a service station convenience store that should be changed to a general retail store. Okay. So staff is available for any questions you may have. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff? Commissioner Hubengardner. Nobody else wants to talk.
Roger, as you and I chatted about this afternoon, there's different parts of the resolution that refers to 1.5% of the space versus actual 15 square feet. Is there any reason why we shouldn't be very specific and say it's the 15 square feet? Because the 1.5% gets to be,
Right.
for those of us who might be math challenged.
Yeah. So there's no reason to, have that 1.5%. It was just like a unit of measurement to kind of show the 15 feet from that 1,000 square feet of the tenant space. But, if the commission would like to have that removed, we can move forward to doing so.
And thank you for showing the cases, because I literally stopped by there on my way here tonight because I was confused, like what configuration of the 4 plus the 7 plus the 6, what would get to 15.
Right.
And because the actual diagram is not proportional, it doesn't show the right size. So thank you for that. But my next question is, should that be called out in the resolution, that those are the cases involved? I mean, we have the square footage.
Yeah.
It's just, and I don't know how the ABC works and stuff, because there's, in construction, we call it scope creep, where all of a sudden there's more bottles in the next case, and the next case, and the next case. So I don't know how that works.
I don't know that we would need to limit it more than just the square footage
The
of
square
the
footage?
area.
Okay.
I think that's probably the most enforceable, and it gives them the opportunity to rearrange their store if they'd like to without having to come back and get something amended.
That's fine. As long as we're specific about the 15 square feet, I don't have a problem. The only other question I had was, is there somewhere, and Roger, I think you alluded to it, but I don't know where it is, in the ABC guidelines, code, whatever they have, and our code, that specifically states that this would have to be reconditioned and reapproved if the site was to merge with one of the retail sites, either side or both. So if this store
Yeah.
were to, to punch a hole in the wall and expand into where Bora is now, or in the other direction, the 15 square feet is better, in my opinion, because that keeps it at 15 square feet as opposed to 1.5. But if they punch a hole and say, I realize that's a different address and that's great, but I just want to understand how that's dealt with.
Right. So in our is it okay if I- okay. In our code, we have standards for when things are considered a minor or major amendment. So something like that would be an amendment to the project. So it would either, depending on the scale and scope of the work, it may come back to the commission, or it could just be done staff level, depending on the findings that it meets for the minor change or major change.
But staff wouldn't change the 15 square feet. That would have to come back
Correct.
to planning.
Yeah.
Okay. And to the public.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Commissioner disclosures, do we have any? No. Do we have a presentation from the applicant?
Yeah, the applicant is in the audience and would like to speak.
Thank you. If you could state your name and city of residence, please.
Good evening. My name is Kaylin Mesa. City of residence is Los Angeles.
Your mic.
This mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trying to figure out which one it is. Kaylin Mesa, City of Residence, Los Angeles. I'm here with the principals of the store. I'm here to talk on behalf of the 8733 store. Just a couple things. Most of it was mentioned in the CUP, and I think you have all of that information. We are a fairly new business in West Hollywood. We have been in business since September. Although I think it said December there, but we had a zone clearance to open up shop because we had a lease prior to, figuring out the business. So we've been pretty happy. We've been incredibly happy as far as the response that we've gotten from the community. Very positive response, not only from the community, but the local businesses that surround our business, as well as the patrons. So we're incredibly happy to be part of the West Hollywood community. Secondly, we're very happy to be part of, a revitalization of a small part of the community. The commercial center that we're located in has approximately 10 tenant spaces. Approximately 60% of them are now filled. The space that we are in was vacant for 2 years, ever since COVID. So we're happy to bring some extra business to the West Hollywood area, and we think that traffic that's coming to our store is benefiting the additional businesses that are ongoing in the space. Couple of things that I'd like to clarify maybe that can be misconceptions. I know we're kind of categorized as a convenience store. Yes, we are, but we're not a convenience store in the same light as like an AM/PM, a convenience store or something like that. I think of ourselves as a little bit more upscale store area. And in fact, I really even don't like the use of convenience store. I think we're more a store of convenience for the community. It's just the way I like to frame it. And I think because we are a little bit more upscale, it keeps a lot of the people away from our store that maybe are undesirable in the community. So, I just want to clarify that and kind of our perspective on the store space. Secondly, we're not trying to be competition for Trader Joe's or, WeHo Spirits. We're not converting the space to a liquor store. As it's mentioned in the CUP, we're looking at 15 square feet. That's, probably about 2 of these put together. It's a very small footprint within our store. It's just an additional product line for us that meets well with everything else that we do. And a lot of what we do, we listen to our customers and see what they're asking for, and we try to comply. This is a little bit different than just any other product because you have to get approval for it. For the amount of work for 15 square feet, it's okay because we want to be a part of the community on a long-term basis. We want happy customers, and hopefully we can contribute to the community as we move forward. The other thing is, we're 8 months into business. We're not beyond that point where we're not concerned about sustainability. As a business in the first 2 years, it's very difficult. The first couple months were extremely difficult for us. But we're kind of at a balance now, and every additional product line kind of helps us get to that point where we think we can be sustainable on the long term. So we appreciate your consideration in this, approval. And yeah, I think that's about it for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any questions of the applicant? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
David, I'd like to open the public speaker portion of the public hearing. Do we have any speakers on this item?
Chair, we have no speakers on this item.
Okay, so then I'll close the public speaker portion of this hearing and commissioner deliberation. Does anybody have any comments?
I support approval.
Any comments? Commissioner Hoopengartner?
This is actually pretty close to my house. It's not within the 500-foot range, but, and I did see a couple of letters from the public. And honestly, as I stopped by tonight, there was a gentleman outside who was very disturbed and ranting and pacing. And one of my concerns when I looked at this floor plan was one of the cases being right at the door, and how easy it would be for someone to just kind of reach in, grab something and run out. And obviously, you're not going to be staffing, double staffing. It's too small a store for 2 people. And I realize how the cases are, there's some layout issues, but that would be one of my concerns. And but other than that, I think it's a good way. It's obviously there's huge margins for the applicant, and it's a good way to support their business. So for those reasons, I would support staff's recommendation with the change of locking in the 15 square feet, and that's it.
Okay, so I have a motion, but do you accept the changes to that motion? So. I didn't make a motion. Okay,
I can move it.
you'll make motion? Could I have a second then? Okay,
And
thank you.
just to be clear, for a question for the motion maker in the second. So Commissioner Hoopengartner, is the change just related to that condition to remove reference to 1.5%?
Yeah, it's in 2.1. It's in the project description, and I just wanted to get it in alignment with 3.11, which is more specific. It says not to exceed 15 square feet, so that gets the job done, and then just has a parenthetical 1.5%. So I just wanted the 2.1 to be in congruence with that. That's all.
Sure. So perhaps the change to 2.1 is the retail use shall not exceed 1,000 square feet.
15 square feet.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
1,000 square feet is bigger than the whole
Yes.
store.
15 square feet. Thank you. So with that correction on the record, a motion maker in second?
Yes.
And does this also include the staff recommended change? There was a change, right?
Yeah, because
Was
it came from me.
No, the other change.
Yeah,
There was another
the service station. That was my suggestion.
Got it.
Yes.
And the motion passes, 6 ayes, and noting Commissioner Jones excused from this vote. We do have an appeal process of the resolution the Planning Commission just approved. Resolution number PC 24-1557 memorializes the Commission's final action on this matter. This action is subject to appeal to the City Council. Appeals must be submitted within 10 calendar days from this date to the City Clerk's office. Appeals must be in writing and accompanied by the required fees. The City Clerk's office can provide appeal forms and information about waiver of fees.
Thank you, David. We'll move on to item 10C. The Commission has been asked to hold a public hearing regarding a proposed request for a conditional use permit for off-site alcohol beverage sales at a service station located at 8380 Santa Monica Boulevard. And Casey, correct? Nice to meet you.
Give us one moment to get her set up.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Casey Conley. I'm an Associate Planner with the Current Historic Preservation Planning Department. I am newer to the city, been here about 7 months, so I'm happy to be here. This is the presentation for the conditional use permit for sales of beer and wine for off-site consumption at the service station convenience store at 8380 Santa Monica Boulevard. The presentation may seem similar, very similar project. The property is located on the southeast corner of Santa Monica Boulevard and Orlando Avenue. It is in the commercial community 1 zone, and it's surrounded by commercial zones to the east, west, and north, with restaurant, retail, and mixed uses, and residential uses to the south. The property contains an L-shaped 2-story multi-tenant building that was constructed in 1965. The convenience store WeHo Supermart is associated with the mobile gas station and has been continuous use since before cityhood. The current store size and configuration was approved in 2013. The site consists of gas station service pumps, on-site parking, driveway access along Santa Monica Boulevard and Orlando Avenue, on-site trash receptacles, and landscape planters. I do want to note that the plan here is for context of the site. The 6 gas pumps that are shown were actually converted to 4 in 2017. The interior of the convenience store includes various shelving, coolers, storage, an office, and a bathroom. 3 existing areas will be dedicated to the display of beer and wine, including 4 coolers and 2 floor cabinets. According to the Municipal Code, Section 1910-030, the sales of alcohol for off-site consumption requires a conditional use permit with review and approval by the Planning Commission. The applicant is proposing the sales of beer and wine for off-site consumption within the existing hours of the convenience store, 6 a.m. to 12 a.m. The gas station also operates during these hours. The use is contained within the interior of the business as in limited to the display areas shown in the previous slides, and there are no changes to the exterior of the building and is just an operational change proposed. Code Section 1936-060 does identify some operating standards for businesses that request sale of alcohol for off-site consumption, which are listed here, and the project has been conditioned to meet these operating standards. With that, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission approve the application and adopt draft resolution number PC 24-1556 for the conditional use permit for off-site alcohol beverages. I did receive one phone call this afternoon in support of the project, let the Planning Commission know, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Yeah, Commissioner Gregoire.
I was curious about the inclusion of the crime information report in the materials today. Is that required by the code, and what was the reason to include that?
It's generally within our best practice to reach out to our neighborhood services department for code compliance and then to our sheriff's department to ensure if we're approving sale of alcohol for off-site or on-site that we know if there's any consistent issues in the area, if they have any concerns for this type of activity in the area.
Okay. But staff didn't have any concerns with respect to the 2 items listed
They did
there?
not, sheriff and code did not.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Matos.
Hi.
Quick question. I noticed in the resolution and obviously outlined in the staff report, it says that the hours of alcohol sales will be between 6 a.m. and 12 a.m. We've seen other conditional use permits at this body before that had a much later commencement of the sale than 6 a.m. Is there a standard time that's typically deployed that this deviates from, or how is the 6 a.m. hour determined? Was that proposed by the applicant?
So we determined the 6 a.m. hour to be just to mirror the hours of operation of the existing convenience store. It is also similar to locations in the area that are already selling off-sale alcohol, so CVS, 7-Eleven nearby open at 7 a.m. to sell. And since it's just an operational change within an existing use, staff didn't feel that sales within those hours would be detrimental to residents nearby.
Got it. So the surrounding businesses, they all have the ones you mentioned, there are 7 a.m. start time for liquor sales?
Yeah, no other business is 6 a.m., but we went with proposed 6 a.m. just to mirror the existing operation.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hoopengarter.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to correct, 7-Eleven is 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. Sorry.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's similar to the conversation on the previous item. If we go to 3.12 in the development agreement, or in the resolution, this language just speaks to number of shelves and number of coolers. But that's somewhat vague because, I mean, I've done construction in the retail grocery field, and there's all different sizes of coolers. I appreciate what's there now, but that's not defined in this document. What would be the best way to make that congruent so that there's, it's X many square feet, or, something that mirrors what we just did and is translatable, because again, you can buy coolers of so many different sizes and heights and widths, and that's not specified here.
Yeah, thank you. So the plans do show the linear feet of the shelves that were measured, so it does associate with that. We could, alter the condition to be more consistent with square feet as in the previous project, if that is what's preferred.
Okay, thank you. And could we also, per the earlier conversation, these cases are being called out to be right at the very front of the store again. And in this case, the attendant is way on the other side of the store. In the previous application, the attendant was right there. And given that the wine rack is in the back, you know, is it possible for us to choose to condition this, that those cases for the beer be put in the back along with the wine?
We could, and the applicant is here. I'm sure they could be able to speak to you if that's preferred or they have a preference for which cooler and a reasoning for it.
So we have that option. Thank you.
Yep.
That's it.
Thank you.
Oh, there's a typo.
Oh.
Third paragraph, section 3, neighborhood worch.
Thank you. Do we have any commissioner disclosures? Nope. Do we have a presentation from the applicant?
No presentation, they are just here to speak.
Okay. If you could state your name and city of residence.
Good evening, Bruce Evans. I live in Altadena. I'm here with Casey Kashani tonight. He's the client. This is a family business. He runs this store with his brother. He's been there for 38 years running this location. I think the staff report covers everything. We don't have anything new to add. I would like to extend our thanks to Ms. Conley. She's been incredibly professional and a pleasure to deal with throughout this process. Commissioner, I did want to address a couple of questions that you had. Right now, the alcohol is 14% of the retail shelf space, so we could certainly agree to a condition, if the commission prefers it, that the beer and wine shall not exceed 15% of the retail shelf space, and that way if they ever change the shelving, they'd still have to comply with the same allocation. And then the other question was, could we move the wine further away from the door? Certainly. We could move it back to where the other wine display is near the coolers. That would be fine. It just happened to work out the size of the shelves that we were under the 15% where we wanted to be. So that's why it's up in the corner, but we can work with staff and move it and find a way to still be under the 15% threshold. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
You're mentioning 15%, but isn't it 14% in the staff report?
Yeah, it is 14%. I just mentioned a condition that it shall not exceed 15.
Okay.
But 14 would be okay as well.
Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Hoovengartner?
Actually, now that you say that, I'm noticing in this condition it says 4 coolers with 7 shelves and 2 floor cabinets with 7 shelves. But I see 1 wine rack in the back, and that's what staff highlighted on the map. Is there something else somewhere that I'm missing?
I think the reason might be for that. Originally, we had 3 and we cut it down to 2, but I'm looking at the plan.
Can you bring the slide back up, please?
Yeah, if you,
Oh, I see another one over.
there's one by the
checkout-
register,
checkout
by the
register.
ice, and then 4 coolers.
I see. So that's the two floor cabinets with the 7 shelves. And all of that combined is the 14%?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yep. I'd like to open the public speaker portion of the public hearing. Do we have any speakers on this item, David?
Chair, we have no public speakers.
Okay, then I'll close the public speaker portion of this public hearing and commissioner deliberation. Does anybody have any comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second, and this includes the changes that were back.
I wasn't under the impression there was a formal request for the changes.
Opposed to a percentage, something that's more measurable.
Sure.
And to move right by the door, to move it more towards the end.
Sounds like they're already willing to do that.
Yeah.
Do we feel like that's necessary as a condition of approval?
Yes.
Okay, then yes.
You're okay?
Yeah.
So we're all clear on the motion?
I think we need a little clarity just on what, we've got the motion and the second on the floor, and we've heard the discussion, but I just want to make sure we can capture what the revised conditions are.
Well, I think one of them is the call out on the floor plan at the front where it says, in very tiny words, proposed beer storage area, that those 4 cases be shifted to the back end of the store.
So we can do it that way, or we can have a condition that they work with staff to establish the optimal location for these with considerations towards safety or something to that effect, so that it's not locked into one area.
I'm fine with that. I think my concern is that it's right at the entrance and it's easy. And given that the attendants are on the other side of the store, that it would just be, further for the person to walk to get, and then, ideally take it to the checkout stand.
I think to the extent that we can get the concern addressed, right, with a condition, I think I would be supportive of staff working with the applicant and that being a condition. What do you think, Commissioner Hoopengardner?
Yeah, as
Do you
long
think
as
that's
the
sufficient?
concern is addressed, I'm fine with that, that being a condition. It's that, as I've said many times, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So,
Yeah.
making sure that it's clear that it's our intent that it be not at the front of the store, easily accessible.
Okay, so could we go with, prior to the commencement of use, the applicant shall work with staff to ensure that the location of the beer and wine display areas are moved further away from the front entrance of the store?
Perfect.
Excellent.
Everyone good with that?
And then there's the 14% versus actual square footage.
That's fine.
So we're doing math to find out what the square footage is for 14% of the total floor area. It is 259.28 square feet, so maybe 260 square feet, not to exceed 250 square feet. So what condition number is that? Do we have it?
In some ways, that's more generous because it doesn't limit the height of the cabinet and the number of shelves, but it's more specific.
Right. So modify condition 3.12 to reference for 260 square feet instead of 14% of the shelf space.
That's fine. Does everyone feel comfortable with the conditions of approval that are mentioned in this motion?
Vice Chair Lombardi?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm tracking exactly what we're modifying. It was section 2 point, or I could just get to my clarification.
It's 3.12.
3 point, that's what I was going to
Yeah,
ask.
we'll
Or is
add, we can add the condition Ms. Alkire read into the record regarding working with staff to move the location of the display areas as a new 3.13, and for 3.12, again, just to reiterate, to reference 260 square feet to replace 14% in that condition.
Oh, you know
So,
what?
Mike-
2.1 is also got the 14%.
That's what I was
in it.
trying to say.
Yeah.
So
Thank
consistency
you.
throughout the document.
That's what I was getting at. Okay. I
And
heard.
change 2.1
One.
with that
Because
same
it's the project
change.
description, so just to get it, again, in alignment in both parts, that's all.
I would defer to the motion maker, but my understanding is we're talking about modifying 2.1, adding 3 point something with directive, and then modifying 3 point, let me scroll, 3.12. Yes, thank you.
And a consideration for the motion maker in the second, we can also add a catch-all to just say, to the extent 14% shows up in the resolution, that will be changed to 260 square feet consistently.
Good idea. Love it.
Okay, so just need a verbal confirmation from the motion maker in the second.
Yes.
Could I ask a question? What's the concern about the cooler location? Is that actually an entrance that's used to access the business?
That's
The
the only
The entrance is at the center.
Yeah, because the entrance is in the middle. I don't see why we need to
It's-
move any coolers around.
It's just because it's again, the attendant is on the opposite side of the store, and given where the existing shelving is, I was just there today, you come in and it's kind of, you can just come in, grab something, and run right back out the door. Now, that's true with any product, but given that it's beer and wine and some of the issues in our community, it just seems to make good sense to address safety concerns, to try and move those attractive items further back in the store.
If it's helpful, I feel better that it's a condition that's not as restrictive, that gives staff the necessary flexibility to, while keeping the intent of moving it away from the door.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Because I was questioning the need for it, but I've never visited the premises, so I don't really have a sense of where it's located in reality. I just see where it is on the plans, and
It's a large
didn't
space.
look like a concern to me from
It's
the
a large
plans.
space.
It's a very large space, and in fact, I came there with my plans and I was looking at it, and, sometimes when I do that, people come up to me and say, "What are you doing?" And the person that was there today just barely didn't even see me. I was behind a case, and, I was standing there in front of the proposed cases, and so that was the difference from the one earlier, which is a much, much smaller space.
If we can, I want to make sure that we're clear and we all understand the layout of this. So if you look, Casey is highlighting with the cursor on the screen where the entrance is to the store. And so I just want to make sure everybody's understanding what we're looking at. So we would work with them to move those coolers as feasible towards,
Or wherever you
further
feel,
towards the
wherever
back.
staff feels that it's the
and
safest.
with the understanding that they also have a vested interest in making sure that their product is secured. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
Vice Chairman Marty?
Not to create further discussion, but I'm in support of either way how this goes, but I don't understand where a better location is, I guess, because it seems like some of the other locations will put it closer to the entrance. Maybe more in watch, but I don't know how that's better. But I'm just going to state that's all that I feel. I don't know where else you're going to put it.
Can you clarify?
I don't think I can actually, because I guess I don't understand what's better about moving it, because then it's closer to the entrance.
But staff will resolve it.
Yeah.
With the applicant.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go on record to say I don't know if there's if it's bad where it is.
Again, a bad actor is going to do what they're going to do.
I think we may be moving a little bit past our purview a little bit.
That's a motion.
There's a
and we have
motion.
second.
Yeah.
Everybody's clear on what the motion is? Thank you.
Yeah.
And the motion passes, noting 6 ayes, and Commissioner Jones excused from this vote. We do have an appeal process. The resolution the Planning Commission just approved, Planning Commission number 24-1556, memorializes the Commission's final action on this matter. This action is subject to appeal to the City Council. Appeals must be submitted within 10 calendar days from this date to the City Clerk's office. Appeals must be in writing and accompanied by the required fees. The City Clerk's office can provide appeal forms and information about waiver of fees.
Thank you, David. At this point in our meeting, and consistent with our city's code of conduct, I will recuse myself because I was part of an applicant team associated with the Sunset Arts and Advertising Program, so I will not be speaking on item 10C, or 10A, excuse me.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Does everyone want to press on through, or do we need a brief break?
5 minute.
5-minute break? Okay, thank you. We will be back in 5 minutes. Are we ready to recommence the meeting? David, are we good? Great, thank you. Okay, we are now going to hear item 10A. This is 8590 Sunset Boulevard. This item was officially continued from Thursday, April 18th, 2024, and we will now hold a public hearing regarding a proposed request to permit the replacement of on-site rooftop signs with a two-sided off-site traditional billboard sign. And before we get started, I'm going to ask if there are any ex parte disclosures at this time. Does anyone have disclosures? The only disclosure I have to make is that I've visited the project site on several occasions, including before this meeting.
Yes, I was there today. I walked the site and looked at each of the locations.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Okay, then let's begin with the staff report. And who will be presenting the staff report today?
We have Jennifer Davis presenting via Zoom. If we can get her up.
Jennifer, can you hear us?
Now I can.
Oh,
Can
great.
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Good evening, Vice Chair and fellow commissioners. We're here tonight for 8590 Sunset Boulevard for a development agreement and sign permit for a proposed billboard. This project is called the Sky Frames, I should say, at 8590. And the Planning Commission tonight is to review the request for development agreement and sign permit and to make a recommendation to the City Council whether to approve or deny. This project went twice to the subcommittee, one of the few that have. It first went in July of 2021, and the design is shown up here on the top left. That design was not acceptable to the subcommittee, and the subcommittee did send the applicant team back to redesign the project. The applicant team took that to heart, completely redesigned the project, and worked with staff in the interim to arrive at a really nice design proposal with improvements in the interior courtyard. It was brought back on September 12, 2022 with the revisions that were asked of the applicant at that subcommittee meeting, and that really meant lowering the sky frames by 3 feet, revising a couple of the plaza frames to reduce water usage, reducing the border of the sky frame to make it less bulky, and allowing it to recede more, and changing the sort of facet depth of the frames themselves. And down here at the bottom is the current design. On site are 3 faces. These are signs. These are on-site signs. So these would be 3 different signs. Lower left shows the 2-sided on-site sign on the top of 8590, and the top image shows existing sign on 8570 and 2 at 8590. All of those signs would be removed, and the virtually two-sided traditional billboard at 8590 would replace those. It is kind of a complicated set of existing signs and proposed signs. So I just wanted to add this image that shows the existing tall wall, the existing billboard at 8600 Sunset, and then the sky frames that fit behind this billboard. So I think this image sort of helps show the sort of context of all of those billboards. You can see the other signs have been removed from the rooftop. Each of the faces of this traditional billboard are 1,200 square feet. The highest one is 105 feet to the top of the sign. These are traditional billboards. This is the first traditional billboard to come before the Planning Commission, and that means that they are not internally illuminated, rather they're externally illuminated. This one is uplit. It is printed material and placed on plywood and then adhered to the structure. There's no animation or movement of the content elements on this one. This is the north elevation, so this shows the building and the two billboard faces rising up from it. This louvered parapet down below sort of covers the lighting fixtures. The billboard itself, the visible sections are powder coated to minimize glare and reflectivity. And there is an existing a proposed media sign on the lower right of the west-facing sign. This also shows the back of the billboard structures. They again are powder coated, and to reduce glare and reflectivity. I think that was also one of the comments from the subcommittee. Here you can clearly see the media logo sign and the faces and the facets of the frames themselves. This image shows the lighting. UL means uplight, LW is linear wash, and these are, so you can see that the billboards are lit from below, going up. I'm going to turn it over to Rick Abramson, our city architect, to talk about the design elements.
Thank you, Jennifer. Rick Abramson, city architect, vice chair and commissioners. Sometimes the apparently simplest moves, like in this case, consolidating billboards and moving them to one location, are actually quite complex and intricate. And in this case, the applicants really had to thread the needle when you look at the existing context because of the tall wall and the adjacent billboard to the west. There was really not a lot of room to maneuver, so I really applaud the design team's research and analysis and trying to thread that needle. I think they were very successful in composing these two boards and shifting them ever so slightly so they work from both directions. I think the other challenge in this case was the urban experience at the pedestrian level and how to stitch a project together in an existing context in an existing complex that already had a certain vibrancy and investment that the property owner had put into it. And so the upper left corner was an initial idea that had to do with an illuminated element up on the roof, and I think staff encouraged them to perhaps rethink that for two reasons. One is that it wouldn't be as pedestrian engaging up high, and secondly is we're really trying to discourage extraneous lighting beyond the billboards with this program. We already have so much light on the Sunset Strip. So they came back with a sort of parental relationship, parent-child kind of approach where the ground plane would be enlivened with three portals or frames that speak to the pedestrian experience. The policy itself encourages public realm enhancements along Sunset, but also allows for one to be drawn off Sunset, from Sunset into an experience and then return. And so this one takes the latter approach, sort of a V-shaped promenade or procession. And these mini frames encourage a certain story that the applicant will get into, but invite a sort of processional experience to the rear of the property and back, and sort of rewards the pedestrian for experiencing these frames. So taken as a whole, I think both the relationship of the billboard to the ground floor public realm and the engagement of the pedestrian, it's really reflecting some of the hopes and aspirations of the billboard policy. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to...
Oh, I think you had a few other
Okay,
slides.
yeah, great, thank you, Jennifer. I'm not advancing here. But the V-shape procession was in the previous slide, and then, there we go. They're located, one starting at the sidewalk, one at the rear of the property, and the one sort of at the middle. The applicant will get into depth about how each of these work together. Next, please. And then, again, the three in sequence, and they will elaborate on them as well. So back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. So this slide shows us driving views. Again, I put this in here so that we can see from a perspective, street level perspective, that the new proposed billboards do not block existing billboards or the tall wall there. And this is a eastbound view from about 1,000 feet back. So this is the skyframe proposal in concert with the other billboards along Sunset there. This is the westbound view, and it's visible from about 500 feet back. These are the night views. Always good to see what the billboard looks like at night, since that is its prominent view. The CEQA on this, a negative declaration, was prepared for the off-site signage policy, anticipating these billboards. No significant environmental impacts were found with that. In addition, for this, for all the round ones, an addendum was prepared to that original neg deck. 8590 was part of that addendum, and no new environmental impacts were recognized in that as either. Staff would like to add a sentence to condition 2.1 of the resolution 241549, and I'll read it into the record here. The Community Development Director shall ensure that the applicant has constructed and installed all components of the approved project, including the billboard signs as well as the plaza frames, in substantial compliance with the project plans. With that, staff does recommend approval of the resolutions, recommending that the City Council approve the sign permit and development agreement for the new billboard and plaza frames at 8590 Sunset. I'm, of course, available for any questions, and the applicant team would like to give a brief presentation.
Thank you. And before the applicant provides their presentation, are there any questions of staff at this time?
I do have a couple that I'll save the most of them until after the applicant speaks, but Jennifer, 2.1, can you explain where, I mean, is that in addition to the existing 2.1?
Yes, that would be an additional sentence to that condition.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll save the rest of my questions for after the applicant.
Okay, anyone else? Any questions of staff? Okay, then we can begin the applicant's presentation. Please state your name and city of residence, and you will have 10 minutes to speak.
Good evening, my name is Maria Martos de Bell. I'm with Kilroy Realty Corporation. We are the owners of the Sunset. I just wanted to introduce myself, give a little background about Kilroy. We purchased this site back in 2017. Since that time, we've invested a little over $11 million into the property, with the vast majority of that going towards public-facing enhancements, facade enhancements, new landscaping, new lighting, new sound systems, new everything that really affects the pedestrian experience, the visitor experience. we're really proud of where we've come with the property and the project, and we see this as sort of scaffolding above what is there currently and really builds upon that. I want to thank staff. Rick, Jennifer, and Brian have been truly patient and wonderful to work with, so we want to thank them for all of their efforts here. And also, I wanted to just introduce Alice Kim. She's our lead design architect, and she can walk you through the inspiration and how we arrived at this design. So thank you so much. I'm available for questions, and we also have our lighting expert here as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions of applicant, or do we want to hear from public first? I personally am okay with that. Oh, you have more? Oh, sorry.
And you have approximately
You need an
9
extra
minutes
minute.
left. You have approximately 9 minutes left.
Okay. I just want to add my thank yous to Marinas, and my name is Alice Kim with John Friedman Alice Kim Architects. I live in Los Angeles, it's really good to be here in this very beautiful space to talk about the design and how it's sort of come along. So as Jennifer and Rick mentioned, we actually have been taking the comments of your Arts and Advertising Subcommittee very much to heart throughout this entire process. And I also wanted to thank Jennifer and Rick and Planning Department staff very much for all of their input. But really it boils down to really thinking carefully about wellness in the form of the pedestrian experience and how everything kind of comes together and connects, as Rick was really focusing on. So what we think we've generated is really a very crisp and clean solution to the really wonderful challenge of providing a billboard at this site. And that also stems, I will say, from us, all of us on the team, kind of looking at the evolution of the billboard landscape of Sunset Boulevard throughout these past couple of years. So let's see if I can actually advance.
And can you please speak into the microphone?
Sure.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry about that. So we do call this project Sky Frames, and Sky Frames specifically refers to the rooftop signs, so located at the top of 8590. And, but they are related very closely in proportion and visual effect and geometry to what we call plaza frames, 3 of them, which are at the pedestrian realm of the Sunset. So one of the inspirations for all of these frames was really the picture frame and kind of a scaling up of the picture frame in the way we see them in parks and public spaces all over the world. And they don't even need explaining. They're so relatable and they're so popular, and pedestrians really just love them. And there's so many things that you can do with them and how you can interact with them. So Jennifer showed, I think, this drawing, but it really shows clearly the relative placement of sky frames as well as each of the 3 plaza frames. You can see that one of the plaza frames, which is marked number 7, forms kind of this literal threshold into the sunset. And another, which is marked 9, is at the very rear of both east and west walkways. And looking through that one, and you're going to see all of this in a little more detail in a minute, you can get this sort of enhanced view of the city and the skyscape beyond. And then this rendering shows the sky frames, but really what it really also shows is the relationship of the sky frames to the threshold frame at the ground plane. And the threshold frame, now you can see clearly, you can walk through it, you can, as you enter or exit. It's a great place to take a selfie. It's just a really, really nice way to express a relationship of geometry, but also start to make that geometry very interactive. So skipping over to the overall plan, once again, you see the sky frames, you see each of the 3 plaza frames, but when you add these arrows which show the pedestrian circulation, you can see that you can come off Sunset and you can move back again, as we've been saying, into the Sunset development and then end up at the sun frame at the very back and then come back out the other side. So here in this blow-up plan, you can see the full geometry of the sky frames. The double-sided billboard structure actually sits on a triangular base, and the base is anchored into the building below at key structural points. And its placement I think, as was alluded to, has been very carefully kind of calibrated so that we're not blocking important views, we're not blocking visibility for other billboards, such as the one that's right next door to the west. And we're also maximizing the visibility of these new billboards as well. So that was the kind of threading the needle exercise that Rick was talking about, and it was actually really, really fun. So these elevations are important for several reasons. One of the things that we would love for you to really take notice of is that the backs, as Jennifer mentioned, are painted with a sky graphic. And they're powder coated, and they'll be coated so that they don't throw off glare, and it minimizes reflectivity. But the idea is really for this sort of skyscape to begin to dematerialize the mass. So now when you're looking at the back of the sky frames, you're looking up, it actually sort of starts to kind of meld into the sky, but still remain distinct as its own sort of art piece. And you can see that in this one as well. And then finally, in this sort of blow-up elevation, we just also wanted to point out that even though the frames themselves are very, very similar, and they have the same kind of proportion, 20 by 60, which is a very standard billboard size, the frames themselves are slightly differentiated, and that contrast, we think, makes it a little bit more provocative and a little bit more kind of curious. It makes you want to kind of understand them a little bit more. So this, this view here, Jennifer pointed this out as well, but again, the kind of simplicity of the geometry and their kind of placement allows them to be very crisp and clean, to hold the images that they hold very sharply, but also not detract from the visibility of the other images and billboards along the way, or alongside. And then we really like this image as well because it shows that kind of pedestrian action and how the kind of sky frame sitting on top of the kind of low-rise volume is very much a sculptural and eye-catching piece in the skyline. But now moving to the plaza frames. Each of these has been thought about to thematically relate to environmental elements, whether in materiality or in the way they're sort of designed. So looking at this first one, which again we call Threshold, it welcomes you into the sunset. You can walk through it, you can take pictures within it or by it, and it has a clear relationship to sky frames, which we've already discussed. I think Jennifer's report mentioned that it used to be outfitted with a mister, but water conservation was actually one of the points that was brought up by the subcommittee, so we removed that, but we believe that the materiality is very strong. Then on the other walkway midway down, we have a frame that creates a place where you can kind of get a moment of respite. The most important thing about it is that it serves as a bench, so you can sit down, you can talk to a friend, you can just kind of rest your feet. And then this shows the frame, sun frame, that we've placed at the end of the walkways where the two sides of the V promenade come together. And it's placed so that you can approach it and you can look through it and you can see the view in front of you in a new way. This frame is actually a window. So it's actually infilled with two panes of glass, which have an air gap in between. And inside, we intend to place a system called Invert, which is a system that was designed and invented by an artist and architect named Doris Sung. It has these kind of metal butterflies inside that curl according to the amount of sun hitting them. And so the view through this portal is always going to be changing depending on what the light condition is at that time. Here's a close-up of that. And there's a close-up of the kind of butterfly component, the metal component that will be inside. So I think Jennifer already went through these sight lines. But the last thing that I wanted to touch on was just that, again, we really have taken to heart all of the things that we've heard from you. And you can see on the left the first iteration that we presented of this Skyframes design, and how we then actually reduced its bulk and reduced the profiles of the frame and lowered the base What this doesn't show is that we also shifted the entire composition over a bit so that it's a little bit further away from Sunset and therefore further decreased its mass and its bulk. And then just a word about what our billboard is replacing. I'm just about done. On the right, you see the two kind of double-sided horizontal billboard that it's replacing, and then again, you see the proposed in the middle there. And then here are some kind of originally proposed and now proposed, again, showing the kind of reduction in bulk and mass. So that's it, and I just wanted to end again with this image that shows, I think, many different aspects of the project, which we're very proud of right now. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies for the disruption. I heard questions and jumped ahead and thought, wow, that was one of the fastest presentations ever. So makes more sense now. Are there questions of the applicant, or did we want to see if there's public comments before moving to questions of the applicant?
I can do either.
I'd be inclined to hear public comment first in this case, if there is any. David, do we?
Sorry, Commission, we have no public comments.
Okay.
That was easy.
And then on that note, would you like a 5-minute rebuttal?
I have no rebuttal.
Okay. And then before we get too far along with things, maybe we should have a design or SASE update really quickly. Would that be helpful? Because I skipped over that in my skipping.
I can do the first one, but not the second one.
Yeah, so I think Commissioner Matos, would you be willing to give just a quick summary of our last SASE meeting, which is more applicable anyway since the design changed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the SASE meeting from September of 2022. It was my very first SASE meeting, was this project. There were concerns raised that the mist frames at the street level may not be a good idea given the climate and drought conditions, and the applicant has adequately addressed that. We asked that there be improvement of the billboard and frames as design elements. We raised concerns that the billboards were too large, and we asked the applicant to look at the structures themselves rather than looking at them as an addition. We asked that the applicant consider making the sign smaller, bringing down the elevation as well. We asked for considerations around frame design, specifically the frame being less solid, bringing the sky into the frame and reconsidering the design for both the frames and not just the advertising. We asked for reconsideration of height and design of the base, and had a lot of comments around scale, execution, and the design elements of the project. Does that adequately summarize the feedback?
From my memory, that's excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Matos. Okay, so now would we?
You have questions for the applicant?
Yes, questions for the applicant. Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Do you have any samples or anything for this invert?
I have a video. Would you like
If
to
it's
see
the same as the one I saw on the website, I don't need to see it.
It might be one of the ones that's on the website.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
How do you propose to protect that, I'll call it an art piece, from the public?
You talking about Sun specifically, or all of
No,
them?
all
or-
those those appear to be very fine,
Oh.
thin,
Yes.
little discs that I can see the public enjoying.
Yeah, no, they would if they were accessible, but they're actually in between two panes of tempered glass.
Microphone,
so it's a
please.
window. It's basically a window.
The microphone.
Microphones,
Sorry.
please.
It's basically a window with two panes of glass, and the airspace in between is where the butterflies are sitting. So it's actually very effective. I mean, if it was in a building, it would act as a sunshade. But they're not accessible, basically, so,
Okay.
which is good.
I couldn't see that, and there was no, it didn't speak to.
I should also point out that because it's a window, the whole thing also acts as a piece of the guardrail, so.
Okay. To that point, so you're planning to redesign that planter along?
Yes.
Along that edge and remove the trees that are there?
I don't think we have to remove any trees.
Hi, I'm the Director of Construction for Kilroy. Yeah, we would modify the planting behind it to remove them from the view that would go through it, and we would modify the planter to be able to receive the frame into it, correct?
Yeah, could you please speak into the microphone? I
Sorry.
think anyone out
Sorry
there
about-
other
sorry
than
about-
us did not hear that.
Sorry about that, I was a little too tall. Yeah, so what we would do is we would modify the planting within the planter so that it would remove any planting that would obscure the view through it. And we would modify the structure of the planter in order to receive the new pedestrian frame so that it would integrate into it.
And the trees?
There are some trees that would remain that would not be within the view, so they would be to the right and left. They would still remain within that planter, but anything that was directly behind the frame itself would be removed.
And relocated to?
We would probably just infill a little bit more dense on the right and left of the same planter.
I don't think you heard me. Relocated to the trees?
The trees themselves, so the small trees that we have that are in that planter, they would be relocated to the right and left within the same planter.
Within the same planter?
Yeah, they would,
Okay.
the planting within the planter would become more dense to receive those trees.
Thank you.
And the image that's up right now actually shows how we propose to reconfigure the planter.
Thank you. So I'll call it the middle frame in the walkway, that appears to be steel?
Yes.
And I was just there this afternoon, and I was looking at the location, and I was wondering what the view, and it doesn't really show here, what the view through that frame is. It's just to the building on either side.
That is correct.
And because this rendering doesn't show all of the existing trees either.
Right.
Okay. How hot is that going to be? Is that truly going to be inviting for people to sit in with the hot sun on the hot steel?
The bench itself, which you can kind of see in the rendering, is made up of wood slats. So you have a wood slatted bench on top of the metal forming the bench, and then we would probably coat up to a certain height, just a clear coat that would actually remove temperature increase from the metal itself.
Okay, thank you. What is the current occupancy of these buildings?
This is the ground plane is all retail. The second floor of the 8590 building where the billboards are going is also retail. It's currently a Gem Equinox. Second floor of the 8570 building, which you see to the left of the current frame, there is office right there. But most of this is retail use.
No, the occupancy. What is the current occupancy?
Overall occupancy, you're talking about occupant load, like one, I don't have that off the top of my head. 95. 95%. Oh, it's 95% occupied, apologies.
Seriously?
Yes, we recently leased the front space. We're working with leases on that right now for, I don't know if I can disclose the actual tenant's name, but we are in leases for the middle building right now, and the two flanking buildings are fully occupied at this time.
I was just there today, and 8590 is vacant on the Sunset side.
So on the Sunset side, we do have a current lease right there. The tenant just hasn't completed the construction to move in. I don't know if I can disclose the tenant's name, but they are a part of the Equinox tenant that's above.
Okay. And 8580 is completely vacant right now, but you're saying that's all going to be occupied?
Currently we're working through leases right now for some tenants to occupy that space.
Okay, thank you. For the architect, one last question. How do you propose to truly invite people into the space? I mean, there's the one frame on the one side that's at street level, but the other two elements that are part of this are not really visible to the pedestrian on the street. So how do you plan to incorporate all these together in a way to be inviting into the space?
I think actually Marina could probably help me with this a little bit, but we've talked about the possibility of using QR codes and using digital means to have people come in, to having kind of interactive mapping, perhaps that's in the lobbies of the office building, things like that. I think there's only, in terms of physically inviting people in, we're hoping that the threshold actually really does draw you in, and then the amenities themselves are going to actually keep people kind of moving down that space. In particular, if it's 100% occupied. So, and I think that part of it is to kind of engender a little bit of a sense of discovery, so that if you go there the first time and you didn't discover sun that first time and then somebody else tells you about it or you learn about it another way, you're gonna go back. And the fact that these things are constantly, sun in particular is always a different experience, I think that that will also bring people back over and over again. So we don't want this to be a one-liner in a way. We want it to be kind of a project that, you know, invites people to come back over and over again, even if they don't get it the first time or discover the whole thing the first time. So.
Those are my questions for the architect, and my remaining questions for staff. So if we just want to do the architect first, it's up to you.
Sure. Are there any other questions right now where the applicant is up here? No? No? Yes? Commissioner Matos?
Yeah, thank you. I just had a quick question pertaining to some of the designs changes that we saw. Was consideration given on any changes to the base of the structure that was mentioned in the Sunset Arts and Advertising Subcommittee? I didn't really notice any changes. I just wanted to see if you had taken a change in design for this base structure.
The base of the sky frames?
Yeah.
We lowered it. We lowered it actually by a good 3 feet, which is actually fairly considerable, and we also shifted it back and we rotated it a bit. So once again, it was really just carefully studying the view corridors, and then also reducing the height so that even though a little bit of the bottom of the sign is cut off from a certain perspective, it's not enough to be detrimental to the effectiveness of the signs. So those were the changes. In terms of the actual design of the louvered system, we did not, it's still a louvered base.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have just a couple of questions, if my colleagues don't have more of the applicant right now. Just to start with my first question, I just wanted to confirm there's no changes with regards to the outdoor seating or other arrangements to the site, other than we have the seat that's in front of us right now. But I was curious to understand a little bit better what's going on, or changing or not.
Yeah, this is Marina, sorry. We recently upgraded all of the landscaping, so those mature olive trees and the seating around them and the whole seating area that's kind of at the back where you see those shade sails. We did all of that when we took ownership of the property, and so we really didn't want to detract or distract from those enhancements, and we tried to find ways to add to that without being sort of too bold necessarily. We don't want to take away from the walkability of the space. We want to have these, you know, small moments within the property that inspire wonder and that engage people to linger a little more. But we have very robust seating existing in the plaza.
Okay, great, thank you. And I have a couple of questions about the billboard design. But first, while we're on this, so this is a metal, it's a steel finish with it's anodized. What is this metal, just to make sure I'm understanding?
It's basically kind of, you could think of it as like blackened steel. So it's sort of oxidized, so it gets that sort of patina to it. And then it has the kind of warm tone of the wood bench itself, so.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe, I don't know if it's possible to pull up the slides of the billboards again, but I was curious to understand a little bit more about what these will look like visually at the back. So like these elevations are showing it. It sounds like you said that this was going to be a powder coat type treatment, is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes, that's correct. I think I have. So if you look at the top left, that's a sky graphic, and so that's the sort of paint finish that we would like to have on it. So really mimicking the skyscape in an artistic way, but using powder coated painting technique.
Okay, and that's on the back of both
That's on the back of both sky frames.
Okay, and then what about the inside of the bevels on each of those signs? What is that finish?
The inside of the bevel is the same, but the nice thing about the sky graphic is that if you make it kind of go to cloud, then the inside of the frames themselves can actually become more in the whiter range, so that it doesn't detract from whatever imagery is in it.
Okay, so it's more of the same on
Yes.
the inside
Yes, it's
surfaces for
wrapping
both
inside.
of those signs?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. And then, so I understand this is a traditional sign in every sense, which is not how some of the other billboards have been that we have seen. So it's being externally lighted, and I know there's two fixtures that are being shown. So there's the linear fixture, and then there's the one that's called UL, the uplight. Is that signage lighting? What is that actually, or is that highlighting the sky frame?
Hi, John Martin, Los Angeles Lighting. It's lighting the base, and it may contribute to lighting the clouds on the backside so that it's not like a dark hole. It's not high powered. It's certainly not going to be very bright because we don't want to detract from the core commercial aspect of the billboard.
Okay, so the linear fixture is lighting the signage itself,
Correct.
and then those
There's
point
several rows
sources
of-
are,
sorry.
the point sources are lighting the base, or they're lighting the back of the sign, or all of the above?
Both.
Okay.
The base, the back of the sign. The linears are lighting, there's like 3 rows of linears to light the graphics, which may be supported by some of the spotlights towards the top since it's so tall.
Okay, thank you. And so white light is lighting the sign,
Yes.
external, but then you have color changing light. So I'm just wondering from an operational standpoint, like when is this changing, or is it fixed, or I don't know, that was covered in the resolutions, but that's been a topic on other projects as well.
We've made statements that if there's any changing, it would be subtle and gentle and like not distracting and not fast. We had a statement in one of the packages, but what I heard tonight was no changing, which I think we can, go with no changing, but a fixed color. So maybe we don't want, we maybe want light blue light that would enhance the cloud aspect. Is that a concern of yours?
And maybe I guess how we're defining change is part of my question too. Change could be, it's a subtle change and that's no change. It's always like that. And the change is, now it's a totally different subtle change one day. So just trying to understand what those parameters are and what that means when a new advertiser comes in. Is it becoming different? What is it doing?
Well, the changes are related to the frame and the back of the frame. So that's not changing because it's kind of painted. And so that color is kind of going to be set it and forget it. We're not going to have T-Mobile pink. We're not going to have Coca-Cola red. And I thought we made statements to that, but we can certainly make those statements.
Okay, I'm just thinking about over the duration of the project.
Understood.
That was my last question. Commissioner Hoopengarner, did you have any questions? It looked like maybe you did.
asked a really good question, and thank you for bringing that up. So to be clear, this color changing uplight,
Yes.
the idea is that it would change when new copy goes up. No, it would always be the same.
It's related to the cloud graphics, which are on the back
Okay.
of the signs. It's
Okay.
not related to the graphics and the advertising graphics, and nor would it, kind of be engaged that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. And perhaps there are more questions of staff. So if we want to do that. Commissioner Hoopengartner or Commissioner Edwards? Do you? Oh, you're good.
No questions? Okay.
And we're not in deliberation still, right? This is just general questions. Okay.
Yeah. Brian, we talked about this via email today. The resolution that we're being asked to sign, et cetera, and all of the documentation refers to this project as 8590 Sunset. But there's actually 3 addresses involved, and if you look at the, thank you for sending the Exhibit B and C today. If you look at that, there's 8570 where one of the existing billboards is being removed, and then there's that center project 8580 and 8590 where the actual new billboards are going to go. And this is probably a good question for Isaac as well, for legal. What is the project address that we are approving? Because certain elements of the development agreement, et cetera, call into calculation and question about, back to my occupancy question, what buildings are involved? Is 8560, the high-rise, also part of this project? What is the project, and what are the addresses?
Exhibit A has a legal description, and I assume it's for all those addresses. It has a number of parcels, but maybe the applicant can clarify what buildings.
Exhibit A went into parcel talk that was way beyond my skill set.
Hi, sorry, Marina again with Kilroy. So we have everything from 8560, which is the office tower, through 8590. The city, as we've been working through this process, has consistently referred to the address where the billboards will be placed as the reference, but because some of the things like the occupancy, we understand that to relate to the entire property. And Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong in understanding it that way, but we own everything is on one parcel, and it's all shared parking underneath, and so it, as a site, is a singular site.
And was subject to the original DA, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So, to Isaac, I mean, I guess, what is the correct way to refer to this project in all of the documentation, given that there are things that cross all these properties and not just the placement of the billboard?
Well, to Mr. Leake's point, I think Exhibit A with the legal description covers the 3, to your point, Commissioner Hoopengartner, it's a good one. It's a lot of plat text, but I think that covers sort of the overall scope. And then to the point from the applicant, the billboards themselves on 8590 in terms of the entitlements under consideration this evening.
Okay. I guess my question would be then, to the average reader, I mean, I could not begin to read Exhibit A. It's just, it takes a whole separate education. So to the average reader, not having those 4 addresses specifically called out in any of the development agreement, is that something that could be corrected?
I don't believe it's anything that needs to be corrected from my perspective in terms of how the site was noticed and how the commission is considering it tonight. Certainly in deliberations, if the commission wanted to make sure for purposes of should they send it to council, just that city did outreach regarding the 3 or 4 individual addresses, that's something that the city could do.
My concern isn't the outreach, it's the calculations. That the properties, that when when someone goes to enforce the conditions of the development agreement, they're aware of what the actual scope is, and that was my only question and concern. Okay. I didn't see in the development agreement, Brian, any language around the maintenance of the elements. So for example, hence my questions about the fragility of the art piece and its glass, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything in the documentation that speaks to, you know, that that's going to be a beautiful thing for 30 years?
I don't know if there's a condition of approval, but I need to look back through the development agreement, but I think there is a condition that for maintenance.
For maintenance,
yeah.
just in general, okay. On page 23 of the development agreement, 6.2.1b. And I understand that this language is probably language that's included in general for a lot of development agreements. But this one discusses height adjustments, et cetera, that are available under a minor change. But given that this is being very carefully and per the applicant's description, very consciously cited and angled and the height, why do we need language that allows for changes for that height to increase?
I think we could, if you want to recommend removing it, that's certainly something you can recommend we would consider, or we would do.
I noticed that the audit language that we normally have in these development agreements doesn't appear to be in this particular one. Did I completely miss it? Or was it removed for a particular reason?
I might have missed it if it is removed, so if we could put
I forgot to do a word search when I had my PDF in front of me, but I couldn't find it. You did, Mark just did a PDF search and it's not in there at all. So the entire audit paragraph is missing.
We will, we could put that in for the council document. The audit language is in the development agreement template, sure.
Okay, I think that's somewhat significant. I think one last question on the occupancy. Most of the projects that we've seen, we tend to have the same language, 50% occupancy requirement on all of our projects, but those projects tend to have a single deep facility and might have a couple stories or a couple sideways retails, but it's all just one single level. This property is significantly different than a lot of the other things we have looked at before. Can you recall, or Jennifer, any conditions where we have looked at the occupancy at the street level as distinct from other occupancy? And I bring this up in terms of activating the streetscape, because 95% occupancy of a high-rise is lovely, and yay you for doing that. But given that one of our biggest concerns on the billboards is that the buildings are not just billboard holders, that they're actually active retail space. So have we ever done that before?
I don't have any recollection of specifically the retail street frontage.
Okay.
In any of the agreements that I've been involved in.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant or for staff? No questions? Okay, if there are no further questions, then I will now close the public hearing and bring this matter back to the commission for discussion and deliberation. However,
Chair, I'm sorry. I just wanted to jump in before you close all of that.
Yes.
We have 2 additional clerical items to read into
In
the
addition
record.
to the previous, okay.
In addition to the previous, if I could do that now, please.
Of course.
Okay. So there is a minor change to condition 2.2 in resolution 24-1548, which references May 2nd, 2024, and we would want to change that to reference May 16th, 2024. And the second one is in the development agreement, section 2.5, it describes the current request for entitlements, and it includes a zone map amendment. Because there's an existing DA on the site, we don't require a zone map amendment with this one. So we remove that language.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, Chair, I did have one more question.
Of course.
This relates to, in the development agreement, page 19. It's back to the money. 4.1.5 on the public arts content. And thank you, Brian, for sharing the spreadsheet on the calculations of this. The 1%, it says 1% of the value of the city's revenue from the permitted sign will be an annual payment of $14,275. But your spreadsheet, when you actually look at the underlying calculations, et cetera, it's actually 1% of the projected gross revenue of both billboards combined. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So perhaps this language should be corrected?
And the 3%.
Correct, yes.
Yeah,
because as you say in your staff report, this escalates by 3%, but that's not actually in the development agreement. And I would also suggest that, would it be possible to actually include a payment chart just like you do on the public benefit, so that the people that have to administer this can go, it's year 6, this is the dollar amount, and not have to do their 3%, 3%, 3%.
I give that to finance, but I could put it as an attachment to the development agreement, like Exhibit E.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Then I will now close the public portion of this hearing, bring it back to the commission for further discussion and deliberation. We do reserve the right of the commission to ask questions of staff or applicant during its deliberation. So Commissioner Hoopengartner, if anything comes up, we can do that. But yeah, let's start to talk about the project. Does anyone want to go first? Commissioner.
I just want to say that I'm always fascinated by this process. That's why I love being up here and being involved. And based on what I understand from when I went to SASE and the entire process, it's gone through this filter that brought us to this point here where we're addressing particular issues, but my takeaway is that overall it's a solid project. That it's, you know, we've put years and years and years into our process and all the rules and regulations that got us to this point. So I'm not gonna drone on about it. I just want to say I appreciate everybody's role in this entire process, and to say that I will be supporting this project.
Thank you. Commissioner Gregoire.
I just want to second that. I was going to make the same comment because it was so interesting to see the evolution of how the plans changed, and each evolution, it improved the project dramatically. I don't think I really didn't like the original. So I'm prepared to support a recommendation of this to the City Council.
Commissioner Matos.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this when it was at SASE. It's definitely gone through a few different iterations, and I think it's gotten better each time it's improved. And the applicant has been really open to feedback, which I really appreciate. Obviously, integrating some of the feedback from both the first and the second tour of the SASE committee. There's two things that I want to just ask about. One of them is a question to staff, is do we feel that there is a condition of approval in the resolution that would adequately address concerns related to the ongoing maintenance of the street frames? The public realm enhancement specifically?
I am not sure if Jennifer Davis is able to be heard. I think she was trying to speak up earlier, but maybe we can get her to weigh in. I don't know if she's
Did you
muted.
want to come back to that one in a minute? If we can remember?
Yeah, if you want to keep going, we can.
Sure.
Okay.
The other comment that I have is I do concur with Commissioner Hoopengarner regarding the removal of height adjustment as a minor change from the resolution. So I would support its removal, and if there's not support here for that removal, then I think that at the very minimum the public should be noticed in the event that the minor change provision is used in that way. Does that make sense?
It does. So the first preference.
First preference is removal.
And so, right, and so then that would be
As it relates to
whatever
height.
action is taken, but
Yeah,
sure.
we can leave the minor change stuff in there just as it relates to height specifically.
Okay.
That's subparagraph B.
Yeah. Other than that, don't really have much other improvements that I would recommend for this project. I think that there's a lot of public benefit associated, obviously monetarily for the city that helps fund vital social service programs, but there's also beyond that, among other things, but beyond that, you know, there's a lot of public benefit with the streetscape enhancements and things along Sunset Boulevard. So that's all I have to say about this. Thanks.
And so we can see if we can get Jennifer Davis to respond on the maintenance condition. I don't know if she's.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. In answer to that, there is no specific condition of approval regarding the maintenance of the plaza frames. Every project, every property has a duty to maintain, but we could add that condition if the commission wishes that.
I think that that would be appropriate to have a condition that you know, stipulates specifically the maintenance on an ongoing basis of the streetscape features.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick follow-up.
Sure. Also, Commissioner Hoopengarner had a question too, so you want to go first? Is that okay, Commissioner Hoopengarner? That's fine. Okay.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Is there a clear definition of streetscape? So,
Well, I think the frame elements, the three frame elements that are in the plans would be the definition. I mean,
okay.
I mean, that's what's part of this.
Right. Oh, no, I just say the
Yeah.
way I absorbed it was streetscape, and then once we put that into the conversation, then it could create a broader definition or a smaller definition, so,
Yeah,
you
we
know,
can-
I mean, it's a good point because we're reviewing it in the context of their existing planters, which personally I think are lovely. I really enjoy them. And, you know, should that all change, that kind of changes the context of those frames. So it's a good point in terms of, you know, are we, you know, but do we want to lock that in for the next 30 years as to how that looks? I don't think so. So,
I think staff's going to come back with language that'll help address some of these concerns, and then we can take it from there.
but I think in particular, as relates to this approval, the maintenance would relate to those three frames.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Commissioner Hoopengarner, to that point, I think that's a really good point. And just to specify that the commission's discussing, and we can read a potential condition into the record during deliberation, but we are talking about the three plaza frames. I just want to ensure. Okay.
I mean, you know, some Windex on that glass is probably going to be useful from time to time. Okay. I want to thank the applicant for working with staff on this. I was on Sassy when it came through the first time, and we had some conversations. I think you have done a significant amount of approving to this space, and I'll be honest, when this building was first unveiled, it looked significantly different than was actually approved by the community, and so I, for one, was somewhat appalled. And I realized, and the original owners had a very difficult time renting it because it was very sterile, and you've gone a long way towards really warming up and making this space inviting. So kudos to you on that. I would be inclined to move this with a lot of the things we've discussed about being corrected. I'll just go into the easy part first. One, the missing exhibits, B and C, that were not included in our draft. Two, cleaning up the fonts. Three, there are at least 4 references to the Planning and Development Department and not the Community Development, and that need correcting on pages 10, 21, 23, and 24. There may be more, but those are the ones that I saw. But let's get into the meaty stuff. I would like to make a recommendation, and my colleagues, can feel free to jigger this, but one of our big concerns is activating our streetscape and making sure that these storefronts are not just a billboard holder. Council just looked at the project at the Sterling Building, which has been vacant for 30 years. And I think it's part of our obligation to do our best to make sure that we do what we can to keep that activated. And I would like to propose that for this project, given the nature of the retail location, et cetera, that instead of the blanket 50% occupancy requirement that we have in the development agreement, as we do in all of them, that this one be modified to be something, and I'm open to suggestions, but 75% of street level frontage be occupied, with the building as a whole being occupied at 50%. Or something like that to make sure that, again, we keep that street activated and continue to invite people into the space instead of having vacant storefronts. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that.
I just say some of this may be a question both of legal and also the applicant's appetite, but maybe there's some discussion here first too before we even get to that. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah. Commissioner Gregoire, you had?
Yeah, I guess it just seems like 50% seems reasonable. Like market conditions change, and it seems to me to have a higher percentage could be problematic.
The other thing is like they're at 95% occupancy. Like I go to this building like every day.
But let's talk about the math on that. There's a huge high rise as part of that math, okay? And so you could have that high rise 100% occupied and the street level is completely vacant. And what we really care about is the street level when we're talking about occupancy. And that's one of the reasons for that language in the sunset advertising policy. And it's why there's occupancy requirements in every one of our development agreements, is to make sure that these projects do not become billboard holders, because the billboard generates far more revenue than the retail. And that's the concern.
Yeah, I would understand your concern wholeheartedly, and I agree. I just think if it was a new development that had that didn't have the history of occupancy, that would definitely be a relevant concern. But given that this one has had consistent occupancy,
no, the Primo, the one whole building, the front has been empty for years, absolute years. On the building in question on 8590, that property has been empty for way pre-COVID.
But they have new ownership.
11 years ago. 27, okay.
I guess
7
one
years ago.
question I would have is, 50% seems to be a number, so is it more like 50% of the street level? But also, I'm wondering, there have been other projects where we haven't imposed this that have street frontage as well, although they may be more of a traditional project with less of a plaza, and this one is unique in that sense.
I mean, a lot of our projects have been the Whiskey or the Roxy or whatever, where occupancy is kind of a non-conversation. So this is one of the first buildings where we've had this sort of mall-like environment, and that would be my only concern. But I'll let you contemplate that for a minute, and I'll just move on to my other comments. I would definitely be in favor of fixing up the paragraph about the art replacement payment schedule being attached, that the language be changed to projected gross revenue, and adding the 3% escalation into the language. Also being clear, and Isaac, I know you've had a chance to kind of contemplate where this might be incorporated, but being very clear that when we are talking about things like occupancy, we're talking about all the buildings and not just 8590. So I'm open to suggestion on how to do that. Adding in the audit language, removing the height, as Commissioner Matos, discussed too, the height, paragraph B, and adding in the maintenance language.
May I ask a question on that one? This is regarding if I understand correctly, you're referring to the portion that allows if there's like a special advertising campaign or something going in that may do something unique, right? Like where you see the projection. Is that what you're referring to? You see a billboard and it has like a little extra on it. You know what I mean? Is that what you're referring to, or something else?
That isn't the language in 6.2.1b.
Okay, 6.21b.
6.2.1.
6.2.1b.
Little
Okay,
b.
I'm going to look at it now.
Yeah, no, that's not the 33% that we've discussed in some of the other projects. This is just a blanket height, ability to change the height of the project. It's referred in reference to city code. It doesn't give the language in there. You have to do a cross-check against the actual code, which is what I did. And I mean, with those changes, I would support this project. I think the applicant has worked hard to do something and worked hard to activate this, but I want to really truly make sure it stays activated and that those frontages are occupied. I realize it's a tough environment, et cetera, but that's, I think, going to be one of the key considerations for me. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just add a few notes, maybe in building on what everyone on this commission has spoken about. Just at a macro level, admittedly, I don't love this project in that the sign feels very large and very massive, but I do appreciate the idea of consolidating some of the other clutter, for lack of a better word, and the applicant has been extremely receptive to our feedback and has clearly made an effort to improve what we saw at Sassy to what we're seeing now, and basically followed our directive. So, I mean, I do love all of that. I do think it's still a large sign. So while I'm talking about design, I just want to point out this is a large amount of surface area. It's highly visible. It's very tall. So I kind of wonder if there should be some sort of sample or something that's available, especially when it goes to city council, of what this metal material is, because it's a large thing. So once it's up there, it's tall, it's high, everyone's going to see it, it's going to have light on it, and I feel like we'll all feel better about it, including the applicant, that as opposed to dealing with it after the fact.
I would concur.
So that's just one big thing that I wanted to note from the design side. And a couple of other points that my colleagues have brought up. in terms of minor change, we just addressed that. I know there was a question about, I think it was audit language. Is that regarding the light monitoring? Or is that regarding something else?
The standard audit language,
Standard,
the
okay.
whole paragraph is completely missing.
From the
And
development
that Brian
agreement?
said that he would add back in, and I
Got
think
it.
that's critical.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure you weren't referring to the signage policy with that
No.
one. Okay.
I can see why it might have been removed because we don't have the traditional digital environment, but we still have to audit the occupancy, et cetera. So I think that paragraph should stay.
And Commissioner Hoopengardner, just for clarity, so the standard audit template language also includes references, requirements associated with cities' oversight of the property owners, business records, retention of records, and those things. So that's the standard template language with respect to audits. And just a note for any of the changes on the DA, as business point or deal points, those would be recommendations up to council to consider that. So if commission moves in that direction for deliberation, those would be recommendations for any changes to the actual terms of the DA.
Okay, thank you. One other thing I wanted to note, I'd be curious how others feel about this and if it's necessary or not, but knowing that there is a little bit of changeability to the lighting on the signage, maybe a simple statement that says, the lighting shall not be used in conjunction with advertising copy, or something like that, just to distinguish, as we've done previously, I think, in some capacity. Just to make it clear, that's fine as the design is, but the intent isn't that it's all part of a giant advertisement now. Maybe there's a way to tidy that up. And I'm definitely curious about anything we can do just to make it clear about maintaining the property. I don't have any concerns at this time that it wouldn't be well maintained, but I think it's always good to have that in there. This is a highly active site and we want it to stay that way, and there's a lot of benefits to the applicant in getting this advertising and related revenue, so I think it makes sense just to memorialize that.
It's a good suggestion, and I would just further point out, this is an assignable development agreement, and because it's assignable, there could be sold to another applicant who's not the same. And so I think when we talk about documenting, it becomes very important because this could be sold 3 times over in the course of 30 years. And we could have very, very different parties that we're dealing with.
The good news about that is that there are revisions to the sunset arts and advertising policy that address that exact issue. That's a good thing.
Being proposed.
That are being proposed, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That would apply to all signs within the city.
Going forward, but not this one.
It would apply.
Because it's not in policy now.
Is that the case?
There's no go-backs.
Staff?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, what is staff should probably weigh in on this, but I guess my question would be the development agreements, and all of those agreements are there. So oftentimes some of the particular portions of the code get reiterated in that agreement, but if something was built and then the code changes, I guess it does. Is that a gray area? No?
Microphone issues. There are vested rights in the development agreement, so it's supposed to give the assurance to both parties, the city and the developer, that the terms specific to the DA don't change absent an amendment to the agreement itself, the contract.
You may recall the AKA situation.
Before my time, but
Okay.
I've heard of it.
It's what was in place was in place, and that's part of the reason for a development agreement. So there's no go-backs. There's no do-overs.
Yep, okay. It's good to get that confirmation. Was there anything else? I think that I hit on the points that I wanted to touch based on the discussions that we've had thus far. I know there was a question about the amount of occupied area, and I don't know if there's further discussion there or if we need to ask.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with.
Not comfortable?
No,
Okay.
because I would support it if there was a deeper analysis to better understand, because we're not real estate experts, we're not economists, or we understand economic development.
Microphone.
Oh, we don't understand economic development, we're not economists. And so for us to make a binding decision without truly understanding what the impact is, I'm not comfortable with. If we had like some experts out there, we could find some analysis that says what is the best efficient means of helping the property owners incentivize, how to utilize their project.
That's not the question.
That is a question.
No.
You're saying about where we should be measuring the.
No, it's
the
not about
occupancy.
how they should utilize their project or how to incentivize them. It's about making sure that the project doesn't become a billboard holder.
No, I understand what you're saying. I understand what the question is, and I'm responding to that question. However you're filtering it, that is your choice. This is how I'm experiencing it, and this is how I am expressing my concern.
Okay.
And so I'm not comfortable with voting on that portion of adding to the development agreement, of having any kind of language that says, I'm comfortable with the 50% proven, it works. Yeah, that's where I stand on that matter.
I just be curious. This seems to be one of the bigger points, so I am curious where everyone else stands on this. I'll go after you.
Go ahead.
You want me to? Okay. I feel like it's hard to pivot at this time. As much as I like the idea, I'm just not sure if I understand. I guess maybe it's a question for staff is, can we modify the requirements? I'm just curious your take on it too, and from a legal perspective, where do we?
If you want to recommend a modification, we would
Recommend a modification to City Council.
Yeah.
So help me out with the calculation here, because this is my concern. Because this is a mall-type environment with a lot of retail in the back. Under the current math, at 50%, those street level, and really there's two big street level spaces, could be empty for the next 30 years. And it would still meet the 50% requirement. And that's my concern. And
I think I understand your concern. I think we could limit the 50% to the commercial component and not to the office, if that
well, that's an interesting idea.
helps with the concern there.
Could you restate that? It was a little hard for me
That's
to
a
hear.
really good idea, Brian.
Well, right now it's 50% of the development. I think it might be considered to limit to have the 50% occupancy only for the retail component. So the retail component has to be at least 50% occupied, and the office is out of the equation. So if you have,
could it be 50% of each
Isn't it right now applied to both evenly at 50%? So what he's proposing would mean that it's 50% for just the commercial, and is it right now the entire project? The entire occupancy?
I will note in the development agreement, there's a reference to 50%, the occupancy requirement. It's referenced the property, and property is defined as the legal description that includes all the parcels.
Yeah.
So the full site.
So that would include the office then?
It says
So
rentable
if we
floor
were to
area.
exclude the office and only make it the commercial, then it would actually be achieving the intent of the sunset policy.
As you said, 95% of the office could be occupied and 10% of the commercial, and they would be in
And
compliance.
they'd still meet their 50, exactly. And given that the office rents, the office leases tend to be longer term and more stable, generally, I love your idea, Brian. I think that's a great idea, that if we were to just change the language to be 50% of retail, commercial, retail, whichever word works, that would go a long way toward achieving. I'm sure the applicant has something to say on the subject.
You want to open the public comment portion?
Yeah, so, technically, we're reopening the hearing again. Thank you.
Sorry, just a quick note. I appreciate where all of this is coming from, truly. I think no one wants the property occupied more than we do. And I know you pointed out, obviously, that the building where these billboards will be placed has had vacancy. It's actually been leased since before the pandemic by Equinox. They've just been working on their business plan and strategy. That one of the models that they wanted to put in and do a tenant improvement for ended up dissolving. Now they're re-strategizing. This is what happens in retail projects. Unfortunately, the pendulum can swing pretty severely in either direction, just depending on the economy, the climate. We would not be comfortable with a more strict or higher occupancy calculation, only because, for example, we have an anchor tenant. That one anchor tenant represents at least 50% of that retail. If they leave, that's a really big problem for us, and it could take us years to market that space. And then we would be penalized with fees plus, penalties and potential removal of the billboards. We are committed, and we are a long-term real estate investment trust. We hold properties for 20, 50 years, typically. And we are committed to making sure that we keep this area vibrant, that we keep curating really high-quality tenants. We don't want necessarily any tenant being a tenant that we're trying to create an experience, a destination, if you will, and we work really hard to do that. And I hope that, you can see through what we've done so far that we are committed to keeping it that way. So I'm happy to answer any other questions that came up that relate to us and ownership, but raising the occupancy threshold would really potentially kill this project for us.
So to be clear, we wouldn't raise the threshold, we would clarify the definition. So most of the other, all of the other projects that we've looked at have been 100% commercial. And the 50% occupancy relates to the projects that are 100% commercial.
No.
So this would be putting into the language exactly the same terms, 50% of all the commercial.
Commercial could mean office as far as land use too. So I mean, it's semantics, but yes, I hear what you're saying. I appreciate it. I just, once you start to focus the calculation on a smaller area, it makes it much more difficult if you lose a larger tenant. And in that situation, this becomes a very dangerous provision in our development agreement that is binding for 30 years. That's where we're concerned.
And not to get into much discussion here, but to be clear, for a lot of our other billboards, they are a single tenant. So they're in the same exact situation, if not worse, because they've only got one tenant. And so for them to lose their tenancy, they would have to meet their 50% occupancy requirement, and they would be in the same situation. The other thing, to repeat what was said earlier, this term is going to go through 30 years, and who knows how many owners. So we have to look to the long term for the city. And so that would be my concern. I appreciate what you're having to say, but I'd like to put this on a level playing field with all the other billboards that we have. And I think Brian's suggestion goes a long way towards achieving that.
So I think you asked a question and clarified your question. Are there any new takes on this? Just to make sure we're hearing from you how you feel. We've asked
from us, from ownership.
Yes, I just want to kind of wrap up this question. And is there any?
We support the way the development agreement was written with respect to the occupancy calculation. We worked very hard with the city manager's office, economic development director, city planning staff to craft something that worked for us, that we could commit to. We can't commit to a project like this if we don't feel comfortable that it will last the 30 years even, because we just really don't know. We've seen with the pandemic, it swung a lot. We don't know what else is potentially here.
Let me then ask Brian, so we have a couple other situations in the city where retail spaces are, and I'll use air quotes, occupied. but they're not. The rental has been turned into a billboard. And this language doesn't really address that either. And that, I mean, and you know, I appreciate the information about the Equinox having rented the space. I'm presumably paying for it. But from a street activation perspective, right now, it's a billboard. And does our language in any way address that when we talk about the definition of occupancy as an occupied, you know, activated space, as opposed to someone's paying the rent, but they've just put a billboard across all the windows?
I don't know if I have an answer for you on that. I mean, occupancy is, did you have an answer?
Okay, sounds like maybe the applicant would like to say something. We did reopen the hearing. Is it relating to this question? Yes. Okay.
Just because I deal with the signs all the time, the city does have a requirement for temporary signage, which includes those window vinyls that you're referring to, that there has to be an active building permit, and there has been. So that is sort of the litmus test for whether you can have the window vinyl clings. You have to have an active lease, and you have to have a building permit either pending, under review, or in progress for your tenant improvement. Those are the requirements under the temporary signage that the city allows you to put those clings up.
I'd love to make this conversational if that's okay
Yeah,
with everybody.
I think, do we have any more questions, or we want to close the public portion of the hearing, reclose and go back to deliberation?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
If you're comfortable with that, Chair.
I am, yes.
Perfect.
If anyone else has questions, I just thought while we're asking them, what would you, so we'll close the public portion of the hearing, move back to deliberation. Commissioner Matos.
I think that we need to be thinking about conditions that we can get to consensus on. I definitely understand Commissioner Hoopengarner's point, and I share the concern for occupancy, especially on Sunset. I live on Sunset. I love seeing a thriving, activated space. I just think it's difficult for us to legislate at this point, you know, someone's lease of a building, for example, in this case of example, the building is leased, there is a tenant, it is occupied, so there wouldn't be any way for us to mitigate for that. It's just a matter of them going through interior design approvals and things like that.
That's the same as anything, yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely applaud the intent, and I think that commercial vacancies is a broader problem that I think that should be looked at. I think that there's consideration given in forthcoming amendments to the Sunset Arts and Advertising. But yeah, to your point, Commissioner Hoopengarner, that is prospective.
Prospective.
Yes, not retrospective. So I agree with that. I just think, you know, at this point, it would be great to make a motion and then to go line by line on the suggested provisions of that motion, because I know that there's been some great input put together by Chair Lombardi and Commissioner Hoopengarner. I actually do agree with the minor change condition that we talked about, so maybe I will make a motion. And
I love the idea of that, especially if you want to maybe make the motion, we pause for a minute, see if there's anything else you want to capture in the motion.
And we can go line by line on everyone's input, and we can all talk about if we want to do it, if there's consensus, and if there's consensus, we can move forward, and if there's not, we can proceed that way as well.
Okay, great. Then do you want to state your motion?
Sure. My motion is to move the staff recommendation with the updates that staff provided to us. And I am open to friendly amendments to that motion.
Should we go maybe just down the line then and see what you would like to add to your motion?
Sure.
I mean, from everyone?
Yes, and I'd love to keep this conversational. I don't want it to be a unilateral decision. I'd love for the body as a whole to weigh in so that we can find where we have consensus and where we don't.
Okay. Commissioner.
Process question.
Yes.
So we vote first on the resolution, and then we vote second on the development agreement?
No, it will be combined. The motion would be for both the sign permit and the development agreement. And so right now is a great time. If there's things that you would like to be included in the motion, Commissioner Matos has generously offered to consider all of that and fold it into his motion.
Yeah, and what we're gonna do, Commissioner Edwards, is we're gonna go down the line, and everyone who has an addition or a friendly amendment to this motion will call it out. We will look down the dais to see if there is consensus, and if there is consensus, I will take it in.
So
And
do you need a second?
I don't think we need a second until we've
motion
collected
is complete.
everything.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but as soon as we're ready, someone can throw out the second. Commissioner Gregoire, was there anything you wanted to note of importance?
There is nothing that I would add, although I'll just register my opposition to changing that 50% number. I would like to keep it as was proposed
So
this
what
evening.
did you want to add? What was it that you wanted to add?
I wanted to preserve, I did not want to make any changes with respect to the 50% threshold. But I did appreciate the sentiment behind it. But yeah, I have nothing to add.
Okay. Not to single you out, Commissioner Edwards, but is there anything in particular that you, at this time, are hoping is in a motion that you may be voting for that's not?
Oh, no, I support the vast majority of the recommendations. They were all well thought of, including everything. Once again, I'll just restate that I'm opposed to any changes to the occupancy.
Okay.
Keep it at 50%.
Maybe I'll try to capture a couple concerns that I have, and then we can see Commissioner Hoopengarner probably has some too. So I know that there were some modifications from staff, and so those can be picked up, some clerical errors. Back to the panel again, maybe we can provide a recommendation that a sample of the panel is sent to City Council or prepared as part of the City Council meeting. And if we could do something about just noting that, the lighting effects are not part of the advertising copy and shall not modify the lighting on the building. I think it's really a challenging topic to right now define occupancy. I just want to point out, I realize that there's some properties that maybe have only one tenant, but I have to think that they've gone through the process of what their business model is, and they're on board with it for that reason. And so I don't know if it's an apples to apples comparison. I really do want to see this occupied and want to think about the long-term outcome of this property and it being a success and always being so, regardless of who owns it. But I don't know what could be changed right now that I would be comfortable with. So just to put that on record. I know that there were some notes about making modifications to our replacement payment schedule, the projected gross revenue, adding the 3% escalation into the language as well. So if those are picked up and if staff understands those and Commissioner Matos is okay with that as well, I would recommend that those be included.
And changing the language to gross projected revenue? Or projected gross revenue?
Projected gross revenue.
And do we have consensus on the body? Again, I'm not trying to make a unilateral decision here. Do we have consensus for all of the things that Acting Chair Lombardi that just mentioned? Commissioner Hoopengarner, do you have consensus with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Commissioner Hoopengarner?
I think we discussed removing 6.2.1B. Which was the height language?
The height language, yes. Well, let me ask you a question, Commissioner Hoopengarner. I know that you have a long-standing history on this kind of stuff. Do you think that we should leave it open for a height reduction but not an increase as a minor change? That was just a thought that came to mind.
Honestly, it's an interesting thought, but so much of this is about the proportion, et cetera, that I think having, the city manager tinker with stuff of this type just doesn't make me feel comfortable at all. And back to transparency in the public process, et cetera.
I support that.
Otherwise, yes, the concept of, well, you can make it smaller, just not bigger is interesting, but I don't think it's appropriate here.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
The other item we discussed was the duty to maintain the property.
Yes.
The maintenance.
That is certainly in it, the ongoing maintenance of the 3 frames specifically.
And of the changes that Jennifer read into the record as well. The audit language, super important.
We're good? Everyone good? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Consensus? Yes? Good.
Okay, so we have a motion. Does anyone want to
Wait.
second the?
Well, wait,
should
wait,
we
wait,
state?
I think Commissioner Hoopengarner has some more, right?
Oh, there's more?
Sorry, the discussion about the project description, because it's back to, if you're back to this occupancy and we're going to say that 8560, the high rise, is included in this calculation, then it needs to be part of the project description.
We'll have a legal description with the addresses.
Right.
Okay.
So we covered the art payment, and then the missing exhibits, and I think that covers it.
That covers it? Okay. Do we have consensus as a body, all of us together, making a decision? Yes? Chair, acting chair?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner
We do,
Hoopengarner, we good?
I think, I know it might be a hard one to restate, but if you want to kind of capture what we've got here, I've got some notes too. Just want to make sure staff's understanding.
Would staff be able to repeat what we're doing?
Great.
Yes.
That would be
That'd
great.
be even better.
That would be the most important one.
I have Jennifer Davis here that will read the conditions to be added, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, regarding the lighting, I have a condition proposed for the external uplighting of the billboard shall not be used in conjunction with the advertising content. That's one. And then regarding the plaza frames, the property owner shall ensure that the plaza frames shall be maintained in their original and approved condition for the length of the development agreement, subject to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Development.
Thank you.
And those two that were added in addition to the one I already read into the record.
Okay. And then I can cover the rest of them, what I picked up in the motion, and hopefully we got it all. So the two conditions that were read into the record earlier, condition 2.1 had added language regarding the plaza frames are part of the whole and must be maintained as such, and that 2.2 changing the date, correcting the date of the meeting. The conditions that Jennifer just read, the one regarding external uplighting would be added condition 3.10, and the one about maintenance of the 3 plaza frames would be condition 3.9. Recommending to council changes to the DA, including the addresses in the legal description for all of the properties involved. Clarification to section 2.5 to remove the zone map amendment reference, which is the thing that I brought up earlier. Include the standard language with regard to audits in the development agreement. Remove the language allowing height increases or height changes as a minor change in section 6.2.1b. Global change to clean up 4 or more references to planning and development services, corrected to community development department. What did I miss?
I think there was one more regarding section 4.15, the public arts and city content requirement. I think there was a request from the dais regarding a reference to projected gross revenue and inclusion of a 3% escalation. But I did want to make sure for the record I was clear, or the team was clear, Commissioner Hoopengarner, the change or the recommended change for council to consider projected gross revenue would go where specifically in 4.15?
Okay, 4.15 right now says the owner shall pay to the city 1% of the value of the city's revenue from the permitted sign for an annual payment of $14,000. That should say 1% of the gross projected revenue. And strike value of the city's revenue. And frankly, projected gross revenue should be a defined term. And that revenue is as defined in the spreadsheet that Brian submitted today.
Which would be an exhibit along with the exhibit B and C, which
Right.
we gave today.
So for those who are following along at home, it's this spreadsheet and it's the totals that are in the first box at the top of the page. So that the $14,275 is the 1% of the 1.427 million of gross revenue. And that goes up by 3% per year as the gross revenue goes up by 3% a year. And so that's what that's referring to.
Understood. So that we would include that in the possible recommendation to council. So when they consider these terms, as Ms. Alkire read into the record specific to the DA, they would consider that possible change to 4.15 in addition to all the others that Ms. Alkire read into.
And then following that sentence, it should be that payment increases by 3% per year per the schedule.
Correct. 3% escalation would be part of that
Right.
recommendation, just that it's clear in that term.
As it says in the staff report. So in this paragraph, there are 3 issues. One is the definition of the base of the calculation, the gross projected revenue. 2 is the escalation of the 3%. And 3 is the actual payment schedule.
Do we have that? Great. What's next?
That's it.
The second?
They seconded it.
Oh,
I'll second.
okay.
Do
So
we have everything? I'm just double checking.
We
Yeah.
have
Give me one moment
consensus
here.
on the dais, here on the body here? Okay. And now we can vote.
all right. So we have a confirmation from the first and second for all the changes Ms. Davis, Ms. Alkire, and myself read into the record from the motion maker and the motion second.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I need one more minute here, but I'll let you. I want to make sure you guys have everything. I just want to double check this list. Are you both comfortable? Yes. Okay, then give me 1 second. The later it gets, the slower my brain moves. So our replacement duty to maintain was included in there too as the standard. Okay. The only thing I did not hear was how we handle or address the giant wall and the panel and what that looks like.
We could include a recommendation to council that the panel material be provided as part of the presentation, or the recommendation for staff to work with applicants so that the panel material is provided for the council hearing.
And I acknowledge that we have a motion and a second already, and I'm bringing this up as a quick check before we go to vote. So would
sample?
you modify the motion?
For the sample?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
And
that's
second? Okay, verbal confirmation from first and second.
So modification to the motion to include that, and
it-
the second stands.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's concurrence over there? Commissioner Hoopen-Gardner?
If you need a minute, I needed one. I knew there was something missing.
Okay. Yes.
You good? Okay. I just want to make sure we're all good now.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
let's
we're
vote.
good. There's consensus? Okay, cool.
And the motion passes, noting 5 ayes. Commissioner Jones is excused from this vote. Chair Carvalero is recused. And the motion passes. There is no appeal process. These resolutions, 24-1549 and 24-1548, are recommendations going forward to the City Council.
Okay, thank you. And I believe we only have one more item left, which is public comment.
Chair, I have no public comments here in chambers. I do have one on the Zoom platform, though.
Okay.
All right, S.J. Harker, Please state your name, your city residence, and remember to press #6 or *6 to unmute. You have 3 minutes.
If you can hear me, I'm not on my phone. I'm on your actual Zoom platform, so I have pressed unmute.
You can. We do hear you.
Okay, good. Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood. While I appreciate Mr. Meritich announcing earlier this evening the meeting on May 21st at 6 p.m. billed as, quote, informational open house for the Willoughby Vista Gardner Avenue, King Street, says street, not road, design concept plan, recently approved by 3 members of the council. This meeting was specifically called due to the fact that residents of Vista Gardner portion of the plan had never been informed about the loss of 56% of residential parking on the street in front of their apartments. Then today, we received a postcard announcing a May 21st meeting. Guess what? No mention of the loss of parking in our neighborhood. It does state that the plan, quote, enriches local quality of life, end quote, when sadly, it will do the opposite. It has the potential of making life miserable for anyone who parks in front of their house, but will now be forced to find somewhere else in the already overparked neighborhood to park their vehicle and hike home. Loss of 56% of parking will make it particularly difficult for older adults and the disabled, many of whom use their cars as transportation because they are unable to ride a bike or a scooter. So please, anyone who is listening to this, attend the meeting on May 21st at 6 p.m. in Plummer Park and speak up about the removal of the parking to put in bike lanes. City staff, please, we're begging you, do better outreach. In case you missed it, the night the council voted on this, Vice Mayor Byers, prior to her vote of approval of this plan, stated she would, quote, happily inconvenience motorists for the safety of cyclists. She is apparently completely out of touch with residents who rely on their cars as their mode of transportation. Again, we're begging the city for better outreach. They took the time to send out this great postcard, but no mention of our real issue with it, and that is the removal of parking. So again, if anyone is interested in this, but particularly the residents on Gardner and Vista and surrounding streets, Hampton and Norton, that will push these cars, which will now have no place to park, off into the rest of the neighborhood. We are very disappointed in what's going on, and since the option was to not do anything, just to leave the Vista Gardner portion of it as it is and leave our parking, please show up and speak your mind. Thank you.
Thank you. David, are there any other public speakers?
Thank you. No, Chair, that is our last public speaker.
Okay, well then, in that case, I would like to adjourn this meeting, and the next regularly scheduled meeting will be here in Council Chambers on Thursday, June 6th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
To move forward, because when you're in front, you get judged and you get criticized.
The more they come, build, challenge states of law and knowing what is seen, what it's moving, there is no destroying. And if you've heard this story, you know more pain than glory.
I'm really excited